This is episode number 263 with New Zealand artist Andrew Tischler.
This is the Plein Air Podcast with Rhoads, publisher and founder of Plein Air Magazine. In the Plein Air Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called plein air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plein air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Rhoads.
Thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the Plein Air Podcast. I'm Rhoads, and we have a great guest today, Andrew Tischler, who's hot. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. You're going to love this. You're going to learn a lot that I learned a lot. Anyway. I hope you're having a really good time. I know that it's fall in some places and winter in some places, early snow in some places. I am so loving getting out. I like the fall. You know, the weather has been perfect here in Austin, Texas. And I actually went last weekend. I went down. It was 2 weekends ago, I guess. I went down to another part of Texas, a couple hours from here. And I met up with about 12 or 15 other artists. It was nothing official. It was just kind of a thing a friend put together, and we all painted together for a couple days. It was really a lot of fun. And I got to wear my cowboy hat. That was kind of fun. I don't ever typically wear my cowboy hat, but that was cool. If I can find a photo of that, I'll post it. I think it's on my Facebook page. You should probably follow anyway. It's Rhoads on Facebook, Instagram, X, Threads, etc. Okay. So at the end of the podcast, we do the Art Marketing Minute to help you sell more art. And today we're going to talk about the value in having a website and the do's and don'ts for email lists. I'd love to know who you want as guests. You know, we pick our guests based on your feedback. So send me an email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com, for any ideas. Hey, before we get to the interview, just want to tell you a couple of things. First off, if you have not yet seen it, we have a great site for you. It's called painttube.tv, not .com, .tv, because it's like TV, right? Painttube.tv has over 700 high quality, professionally produced videos from some of the world's leading artists. I mean, we do like high resolution. We have big cameras. We have a sound stage. We do it upright, and we do these incredible videos. Some of them are really, really long. So if you want in-depth training, some of them are shorter. We do plein air videos. We do portrait videos. We do everything you can imagine. So that's at painttube.tv. Check it out when you get a chance. It's really worthwhile. Also, I want to mention to you guys that I do a program every day where we're teaching art. That program it's called Art School Live, and it's on YouTube. I also put it on my Facebook and Instagram, but go to YouTube and look up Art School Live, hit the subscribe button, Art School Live, hit subscribe, and then hit that little bell. That little bell will notify you when we go live. We've had over 16,600,000 views on that program, which is pretty amazing to me. And we have on Mondays, I do art marketing. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we have different guest artists teaching. And then on Fridays, I do critiques. We call it Feedback Friday. You don't want to miss it. We started it with COVID. We've gone continuously since then. We love it. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. So check it out, Art School Live on YouTube. Also, we have a free book for you. It's a free ebook called 201 Essential Plein Air Tips. You can get it. Just go to pleinairmagazine.com/ebook. And last but not least, certainly not least, the world is getting together at the Plein Air Convention. It is the world's largest plein air event. We have people come in from all over the world. People come from every state in the U.S., coming from Mexico and Canada and countries around the world. We have a 5-day event. This year, it's taking place in the amazing Lake Tahoe and Reno. And it's incredible. We have a massive space. We have 5 stages. And so there's stages for watercolor and pastel. There's stages for oil. There's stages for pretty much everything you can imagine. And we have a giant expo hall. And it's the only place you're going to find all the plein air stuff, because you don't see a lot of plein air stuff. Once in a while, you'll see a pochade box in an art store, but usually it's a French easel or something. But you're going to see a lot of the different easels, different stuff that's specific to plein air, plus, lots of other stuff. It's a real joy to be in there and to have all that stuff surrounding you. Plus, we all go painting to the same location every day. Now, it's different each day, but we all go together. So it's amazing to be standing there, in this particular case, on the shores of Lake Tahoe with the big rocks and the giant pine trees and the big pine cones and the beautiful crystal clear turquoise water and the mountains in the distance. And we're all going to be painting there together at Lake Tahoe. And we have 3 or 4 other different painting locations we go to. So it's different every day. One of the days is going to be in Virginia City. Virginia City is one of the old original Western gold mining towns, and it hasn't changed from the beginning. So we're going to basically go there and kind of take over the town and paint the town and the old Western village. And sometimes you'll see a miner with donkeys. It's really pretty cool. And so that's going to be taking place. And so check it out. Plein Air Convention. We have roughly, usually by the time we're done, we have about 80 experts. We have people teaching on 5 stages, as I mentioned, and we have people out there working with you in the field. And that's a really terrific thing to have, because they're out there to work with you. And we have probably 50, 75, 80 artists out there working in the field. And this year, really incredible this year, we have 2 top tier artists for our pre-convention workshop. We have a watercolor pre-convention workshop with, get this, Joseph Subukvik. Joseph is considered to be one of the probably top 2, top 1, top 3 watercolor artists in the world. He's making the trip over from Australia to come and teach. And this is a rare pre-convention workshop. He'll also be on the stage at the Plein Air Convention and teaching there as well. You don't want to miss that. And then we haven't had this for, wow, a long time. We have Scott Christensen, one of the finest artists in the world. And Scott is going to be teaching a pre-convention workshop at the convention. This is monumental. If you go to pleinairconvention.com, you can see all the great guests. It's pretty amazing. Okay, so now we're going to get to Andrew. Andrew is on fire. He has become a sensation online, certainly has become a mega influencer as an artist, and is influencing lots and lots of people to learn to paint. He was born in Texas, which I discovered. I thought he was someone who lived in New Zealand, but he was born in Texas, and his dad was an artist. We're going to learn all about that. We'll learn all about this, but he has a big YouTube channel, big online academy, and he's got a great story. You're going to learn all about that story. So let's go to this right now with Andrew. Andrew Tischler, welcome to the Plein Air Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure, real honor to be here.
Yeah, no, this is real confusing to me, because here you are in New Zealand, and I thought you were going to have this New Zealand accent. What's the story here?
Yeah, so no, I'm an American. I was born in Texas, left there when I was 6 years old, moved to New Zealand as a young boy, lived in Wellington, New Zealand from the ages of 6 to 10, then spent a good many years growing up and going to school and doing all that stuff in Australia, married a New Zealander, moved back to New Zealand. So I don't fit anywhere. I'm pretty confused.
What took you there originally? Was it parents moved?
Yeah, pretty much. Parents and work. My dad was itching for an excuse to get out of the U.S. I think he had just come to the end of his time there, and he's an artist, he's a sculptor, and when he remarried, he married a zoo veterinarian, and so she got a posting from, I think at the time she was either at the Brownsville Zoo or the Gladys Porter Zoo, somewhere around there, but it's in Texas, and so she got a job posting in Wellington, New Zealand of all places. And they were just like, heck yeah, like, we're out of here. And they packed all of us kids up and we moved, and suddenly now we're in New Zealand.
How many of you
So
are there? How many
I
siblings?
have an older brother and an older sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So New Zealand has a surprisingly large number of sculptors. So did your dad kind of get involved in the sculpting community in New Zealand?
Not at all. No,
No.
no. So I mean, in a manner of speaking, he did. I mean, he always kind of was always eager and very keen to help anybody who needed help. He's always been very generous in that way. He did have, a bit of an impact on some of the local sculptors, but he didn't really sell any work here in New Zealand. He continued to make sculpture and then ship it across to the United States. And what my father specializes in is, I guess it could best be described as large, life-size sculptures of animals for zoos and museums and institutions like that. And they're all bronze. But shortly after we moved, it was probably maybe 2 or 3 years, he ended up I think, I'm not sure how he describes it, but I think it'd probably best be described as burnout. And he ended up going to work for a museum organization called Te Papa here in New Zealand. And then he got poached, headhunted by the Perth Zoo. And so they also needed an exhibits designer and a veterinarian at the time. So that's what it made us leave New Zealand, and we ended up in Perth. So he took about, all up, he took about 10, 12 years off sculpting, and then ultimately went back to it. And now he's doing some massive work still. I mean, he's getting up there close to 80 now, and he's doing some huge work.
Well,
still, so.
well, I'll have to make an introduction to somebody that I know that has an incredible sculpture park that you need to know, but we'll do that off camera.
Awesome.
So, did your dad have an influence on your desire to go into art? Was this something that was discouraged or encouraged?
Very much encouraged. For me, it wasn't really an option. I just saw dad doing this, and I just wanted to be like dad. And it was always a case of, sure, you can do this too. Here's the tools. Here's the pencils. Here's the paint. Here's the paper. And it was always very much encouraged. I always had material on hand. I was always encouraged to do something creative. I was very much discouraged from things like screens, television, movies. There were no video games in the house at all. Of course, I was an 80s kid, 80s and 90s. And so it was always very much creative. So he really did encourage me. But there were also some, the discouragement showed up with other external stuff, school, teachers, and various things like that. But I always found that was such a good base for me, having that layer of support from the outset. So in my mind, there was never any question. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to be an artist. I was a weird little kid because, if you asked me, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's like, well, I'm an artist now. I don't see that changing. I'm just going to keep being an artist, So
Did your dad paint?
He did paint. He paints and draws very well. But he's mainly sculptor.
So is that where you first did he teach you your first painting lessons?
Yes, he did. Yeah. So he understood the obviously the fundamentals of art are fundamental, whether you're sculpting or painting, and we're talking traditional realism here. Yeah. So you've if you're going to be able to sculpt something at that level, you've got to be able to draw. And so it always started there with drawing. There's lots of drawing going on, and then with painting, there was a there was just drilling the fundamentals is what I remember. Is here's how we're going to start. Here's how we're going to start with a basic palette of colors. Here's how we're going to think about tone. Here's how we're going to think about color. And I just remember some very fundamental lessons. And full circle. This is what I teach my students now. I often chuckle because it's like I remember doing these lessons when I was a kid, and it was extraordinary paradigm shift for me then. But even in my own work, in my professional work, I'm going back to fundamentals continually, and it's
So,
what I learned from my father.
so when was the first time you went outside to paint?
Oh gosh, not until much later. I always looked at that as something that was pretty scary. I didn't have the
Well, it is scary.
oh yeah, and it still is. It's still exhilarating, but I didn't really start that as part of my practice until years and years later, and I'm still just getting going with it. So it's been an interesting process, but I was really influenced early on. So this is back in the early days of Facebook. I came across a little known artist named Jeremy Lipking. You might have heard of him.
That's a small little artist. Yeah, nobody's ever heard of him.
He's an absolute legend. And I remember like he was out there painting with artists like Ignat Ignatov and Tony Pro. And I was watching like these American painters. And this is going somewhere around 2008, 2009, around there. And I was watching these guys just going, whoa, what are they doing? And I had a book by a guy named Trevor Chamberlain, and he was talking about a Pochade box. And I was like, oh, that's right. They're using this Pochade box. I read about it in that book. And then I got one. And so I started really taking up the challenge of plein air painting probably back in 2010. And then it would just be fits and starts, but it wasn't a real core component until, I don't know, the timeline's so fuzzy, but probably about 6 years ago, I started making it more of a core component of what it is that I do. And now I find that it's essential. I don't get out as often as I'd like, but it's those discoveries that you're making out in the field, on value, on color, on line and shape, on design. And there's also a process of editing what you're seeing in front of you. That's always very interesting. By just moving your vantage point left or right, you change the composition totally. And so now I take these studies, these plein air field studies, and I'm incorporating some of the discoveries that I've made. That's how I mix that color. Oh, this is what I'm going to draw upon back in the studio. I take that experience, and that helps me add a little more depth to my studio paintings. And I think it's been a complete paradigm shift for my work, because I'm mainly a studio painter, but it's been a complete paradigm shift for my work, taking that experience to the easel to create something like that, this big one that you see above me. Which
Well,
is
for
still
the people who are listening on audio, they don't get the benefit of seeing it, but you can look at the video version as well. I hear that a lot. I hear this a lot from studio painters. The first thing I hear is, why on earth would I ever want to go out plein air painting? It's a stupid thing. I'm dealing with moving light and wind and bugs and everything else. And then once I can convince them to do it, which sometimes doesn't happen, then they get out there and their first couple of experiences are pretty rotten. And then if they have the courage to stick with it, suddenly they have an epiphany and they realize this has changed everything. This changes how I view light. This is changing how I view form. And of course, the experience becomes much better once you get comfortable with it, because now you're being outdoors and you get to be in nature. And I don't know about you, but every time I paint outdoors, I have these memories that I would never get painting a photograph.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can definitely second that 100%. There's something about the way it anchors that experience in your mind, and you're drawing on more than just the visuals when you're painting in the studio. Well, I find that I am anyway. It's not just trying to replicate that landscape. You're trying to inject into that your raw emotion, the way you feel about what it is that you're seeing. And ultimately, you get so much more if you can have that experience of shivering on top of that mountain and get some sort of sense of the jaggedness of those rocks, what they felt like under your feet. There's a level of appreciation there that I think is missing when we're just doing it from photographs in the comfort of our studio.
So how
And
do you, go
sorry,
ahead.
go on.
No, please.
Well, I was just going to say that yes, plein air is a challenge. Like it doesn't always go well. It often goes very wrong. But even I'm finding now that even those times where it goes really wrong, those are some of my favorite experiences. You know, it's just that process of continually getting just destroyed. You know, thinking I know how to paint. Why is it looking like this? You know, you're making these snap decisions, you're making these fast judgments, but I think it makes it all the more exhilarating.
Well, I want to interrupt this incredible Andrew interview just to tell you about a couple of things that are going on. First off, the world's largest online art conference is going to take place in January. It's called Watercolor Live. If you want to learn watercolor or you know watercolor and you want to get better, this is the place to go. We have, I get to host it, which I'm very privileged. We have people attending from many, many countries. We did Realism Live just a week ago, and we had 14 different countries attending, some people watching live, some people watching on replays, and every state in the United States watching. And Watercolor Live is our next big event, and that's going to be in January. So some of the top artists in the world, including Alvaro Casanet. So you don't want to miss that. So that is watercolorlive.com. Also, I do these retreats. I have more fun. I love doing things in person. In-person stuff is my favorite things to do. So I do retreats. I do a spring retreat in the Adirondacks. It's called the Publishers Invitational. I do by the way, that one's still got some seats left. I think about 20. I've got one called Fall Color Week, and that is in the fall. And that one's only got 22 seats left. And then I have a brand new retreat that's going to be in the winter. It's called Winter Art Escape, and it's a chance for you to go to Florida and be in the sunshine in the middle of February, or early February anyway. And this is a brand new one, and right now there's still 50 seats available, but that's limited to 100 people, and it's going to be amazing. We're painting in St. Augustine. If I said St. Petersburg, I was wrong. St. Augustine, Florida. St. Augustine is the oldest city in America. It's got a lot of the old Spanish architecture. It's absolutely beautiful. The beaches, the lighthouses, the gardens, the old buildings, the old gates. It is a painter's paradise. And we have secured special permission from the city to paint in some areas that otherwise they don't love people painting in. There's still a couple places we can't paint in because it's dangerous because of crowds. But we're going to be painting together for a week. We go to 2 different locations every day. We paint together. You can go off on your own if you want, but the best part is making the friends. And we sit up. We have all of our meals together: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We sit up at night and we sing and we party and we have a good time. We have musicians and we paint portraits. It is a ball. It's so much fun, and we keep selling out the other 2 retreats, and we decided we better add a third one because there are a lot of people who can't get in and they want to come. And so we've developed this one. It looks like this one's going to be sold out potentially by Christmas because it's a good Christmas present. So check that out at winterartescape.com. Absolutely. So you talked about putting emotion in your paintings. Mm-hmm. You know, we all go through this period of time when we're just trying to figure out how to survive as a painter, right? You know, you start out learning to mix color, learning values, et cetera, and then you get to the point where you're technically proficient, relatively technically proficient. But some of us never get there completely. Some of us never take the leap between going from being a good technical painter to being a painter that expresses emotion in our paintings. Mm-hmm. How do you get there? What is your process?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I miss the mark all the time. So it doesn't happen on every painting. But that is my goal, is to have something that feels totally authentic. And so recently, I've been going through this process of rediscovering what it is that makes me tick artistically. What is that thing that pushes those buttons for me that just sets my heart on fire? When we get overly obsessed with optics, with the way this thing looks, does it look real? Is it technically well executed? All that. Sometimes you could just boil the life and the meaning out of it. And I've spent years doing that kind of work, and probably will produce some more pieces that do just that, that are just void. They just completely empty. For me anyway. Somebody might get something out of it, because a lot of the meaning is an emotion is what the viewer is bringing to the work, right?
Yeah,
I
right.
can only go so far. But I think the most important thing that I found is that you have to be all in on what you're doing. Like you've got to be completely emotionally invested in what it is that you're doing. If you can't at least start there, you don't have a chance of actually having that come through the work. And there's this thing that we get caught up in. I can't put it any better than Joe Paquette puts it, about this balance between the internal and the external. I think that perfectly sums it up. When we're caught up in the external, we're inauthentic. But when we're internally led, we are being authentic. And so how does that look for me? I kind of lost the thread a little bit. I got too caught up in the client's mind. I was starting to get there with this painting above me, which for the people listening is a big imagined scene that's based loosely on New Zealand, but it's a commission. And I was following a script from my client. And so it got very technically involved, and I was just all about technique and just being a technician with the paint, to a point where you do lose that thread. But going out in the field and coming face to face with my subject, and I'm blessed. I live in the south of New Zealand. Wanaka is a 2-hour drive one way. Queenstown's a 2-hour drive another way. And it's the most jaw-dropping landscape on the planet. And so I went for a couple of scouting missions for our upcoming plein air tour here in New Zealand. And I was just figuring out where am I going to take my students to paint. And it was just one scene after another, and it just set me on fire, man. I was looking at this thing going, that's it. That's what I'm trying to do. That's the thing right there. It's that power. It's that raw energy. It's the height and the scale and the depth and the wind and that clarity of the water and the hardness of that stone and the trees just swaying and the mix of different species of trees and the layered landscape. It was, when you're confronted with it, it's overwhelming. And it's like, that's what I'm going for. And so trying to figure that out, bottle that up, capture that, bring that to the canvas, bring that to the easel. That's what I'm about. But, maybe that's not the thing that does it for you, whoever's listening. Whatever it is that gives you that fire inside, that's the thing you got to act on. And I think that is foundation. That is the starting point. If you cannot start there, it's not going to end up in the final article. So whatever it is that you're doing, just be you, be jazzed about it, be on fire for that idea. And you might not hit it on every one, but you will start to improve that average of hitting it more and more and more.
So are you suggesting that when you start a painting, that the thing that appeals to you most about that painting is the one thing that you want to kind of get that down before you finish everything else, kind of get that area of inspiration? Or are you suggesting something different?
Well, I suggest let's take this from a plein air standpoint. Let's look at maybe this is how it would translate specifically to plein air, and probably more appropriate for your audience as well. I think that when we get caught in our head, let's say there was a mountain and a stream and a tree and all that stuff, and you're like, I'm going to paint that scene right there because that's got the right mix of elements to me. And I remember the last time I painted that mix of elements, it sold, it did really well. I got more likes on Instagram or whatever, but there's something happening at your feet with the clarity of water and these weird random mix of stones and edges. You're like, but that looks really cool. I really love that. And that's kind of intriguing for me, but I'm going to take the safe option and paint this. So what I'm saying is wherever you are, whenever you are, just stand there looking at the landscape, and whatever makes your heart sing, man, that's the thing to paint. That's the thing that you need to be going for. I love Sargent's approach. You know, I heard, I'm not sure how accurate this is. Maybe you'll know, but I love Sargent's approach where he, I just knocked my microphone over. he, he would not obsess over what he was going to paint. He would just roll up and go, bam, that's it. And some of his compositions are kind of, personally, some of them are a little bit awkward, but there's a freshness of boldness and an energy that comes through in his work that I don't know if anybody's got him whipped yet. I don't think so. Like we all look at Sargent and we're just like, how, dude, how? He was just going, I think he was going for that thing that was really lighting him up inside.
So what would you ask Sargent if you had a chance to get face to face?
Oh, wow. I don't think I'd ask him anything. I don't think I would dare open my mouth in case I said something stupid. I would just sit and watch.
Yeah.
I'd just sit and watch, just like, hey, dude, just, yeah, you do you, don't mind me. You know, I would just watch what he did and just from his first strokes to his last and just be like, yeah, what an incredible opportunity that would be.
So how do you think he painted? Do you think he painted with the energy that it appears he painted? Or do you think he was very methodical and he intentionally added the energy strokes at the end?
I don't know. I've heard, again, and I don't know how accurate this is, I've heard that it appeared that he was very energetic, but the strokes that he made were very considered and very, very thought out. So he would spend a lot of time in that palette mixing the color. You'd think about that stroke, and if that stroke wasn't quite right, he'd wipe it away and do it again, particularly for some of those portraits and studio work. But again, I don't know how accurate that is, if that really represents how he approached it. But I think what the danger is that we can look at his work and assume that he had a particular type of approach. I think this is what makes it such a mystery looking at the old masters. You know, it's rare that we'll have documentation of process, but that's something that I find really frustrating. Why can't I watch the Bierstadt tutorial? Why can't I watch the Peter Mork Monstead tutorial? I want to see that, but you're just not going to find it.
Well, that's why you and I do what we do. I mean, I think that the frustrating thing is, you know, there's a 5 or 10 second clip of Monet painting and smoking a cigarette in black and white, but there's nothing more. And, you know, I got into the tutorial business 20 plus years ago because I was frustrated as an artist. And I think that anyone who becomes a really great artist has, I think they have a responsibility to share that, you know, that it's because we don't, you know, you spend 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years learning a craft. I mean, you look at somebody like, who's living like Albert Handel, who's in his 80s, early 90s, I'm not sure, 86 maybe. And his work continually evolves. And, you know, Albert did videos 10 years ago that are completely different than videos he did for me last year. And I think that, you know, the problem is that, you know, some artists say, well, you know, that if I do videos, they won't come to my workshops. No, they'll come. Because, and the other thing is you're reaching people that otherwise wouldn't be reached, who can't come. And I just think that it's a shame if somebody like Sargent dies and we don't have much documentation. I've talked to his grandnephew, Richard Ormond. There's a chapter in one of the last books that he did that talks a little bit about his technique, but there's not much more on it. And most of it was coming from the students. So I do think that there is a responsibility to share that. And you have done a terrific job of that. Of course, I learned of you, and I think everybody else in the world learned of you because you were so aggressively marketing on Facebook, putting yourself out there, putting your tutorials out there. And I think, you know, what you've done is a phenomenon. It's, you know, you became an instant overnight success. I'm sure that's not true in your mind,
No.
because you've
Yeah, it
spent
only took me 2 decades, bro.
right, but nobody knows that because all of a
Yeah.
sudden you got smart about Facebook marketing, and all of a sudden you
Yeah.
were out there, and
Yeah.
boom, there you are on the scene and
Mhm.
dominating and doing a great
Mhm.
job. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you.
I should mention that you have a series of tutorials and a lot of other things on your website, which is
Mhm.
called Tisch Academy.
Mhm.
You
That's
and
right.
I are essentially competitors, but that's okay
T-
because we all
Tish
need
dot academy, no www dot on there, just Tish dot
Tisch
academy.
Academy.
Yeah, that's the
Okay,
one.
that's
Yeah.
good to know. So, what a wonderful thing you've done.
Thank you.
So, I'm curious because you're obviously doing well with your tutorials. How do you
Mhm.
make your living? Is the majority of your living made from selling paintings or from teaching painting?
It's well, it depends on what's kind of going on. I'd say the most steady income is from teaching painting, which is my passion,
Yeah,
and I feel like it is my life's purpose. Um, Nothing is quite as satisfying as, you know, taking somebody by the hand and lighting them up, where they're like, "Oh, wow, I understand this concept now. I can do this. I can really do this." Like I live for that, and I live for those emails and those comments that come back going, "Hey, I just watched your video, and man, I tell you what, I've gone out, I got all new paints, or I now know how to compose my paintings, or I now know how to like punch through that 2D surface and create that depth and that third dimension." So I really am jazzed about that. But I'm also a painter. So before I ever showed up online, I was already a professional artist for over a decade, and I was selling and exhibiting at a pretty high level in Australia, and then moved across to New Zealand. And I went into the online teaching thing kind of out of necessity, but I'd say now the way it works is the most steady income is obviously from the teaching side of things. But whenever I sell a painting, it represents a pretty significant sum, and those continue to sell. So I mean that's a commission piece, the big one behind me. So again, for the people listening, I do get these giant landscape commissions that come through, which I'm very blessed to have. But I also tell my clients, hey, look, I'm an art teacher, so your painting's going to end up in YouTube. Is that okay? And they're like, yeah, sure, go for it. It's been interesting though that those two circles don't seem to overlap. If you were going to draw my business as a Venn diagram, you've got the physical art world over here, you got the digital art world over here, the people that like to learn and watch the tutorials, and there's a little bit of an overlap there in the center. But it's not that many people, not as many as you might think. So it's very interesting. So my clients really don't seem to mind that I put all of the paintings that I paint for them online. So
we're
they're cool with that.
seeing an interesting thing happening, and that is that there's a huge number of plein air collectors who are becoming artists.
Oh,
That
wow.
the
Awesome.
people at Easton, Plein Air Easton, told me they first started seeing this happen about 3 or 4 years ago, where people who had been coming to this plein air event and buying paintings for years have now started coming and learning to paint. And they're still
Awesome.
buying paintings because they're collectors. Once a collector, always a collector. So I think
Awesome.
that's interesting. So when you do a commission,
Mhm.
what kind of guidelines do you give the client? Because I find when I do commissions that sometimes I just hate them. And I
Mm.
hate them because, somebody hands me a picture and say, I want you to do a painting of this. And I know if I move that tree or I move that rock to make it a better painting, they're going to notice it. How do you feel about that? How do you deal with it? What guidelines do you give your clients?
Yeah, this is fortunately now. All right, there's several things here, and I'll try not to go off on too many tangents. But yeah, I mean that is a danger, right? You're going to do something that might throw a bit of a curveball into the process, and your client's going to basically stumble there, and you might have some upset. But what one thing that I try to do is I build into my process of dealing with my clients so it's always win-win. Every business relationship I get into, it has to be win-win. So I need to get out of it what I got to get out of it artistically. That protects my client. They're getting out of it my best work, and something that they can really show as a signature work. I've done those things in the past that I felt like I was selling myself short. I felt like I was ignoring my principles just to go for the sale and do what the client wanted me to do. And ultimately, we both suffer there. They don't get something that is really authentic, and I don't get an experience out of that I'm happy. I can't put it on my website because there's no way I'm going to show that on my website because it's not typical for what I do. So the way I protect myself and my clients now is I say, okay, you can give me a subject that you'd like to see. Let's say, so there's a famous landscape here called Milford Sound. It just so happens to be, one of my favorite landscapes on the planet. I love painting there. There's a little picture of me plein air painting at Milford Sound. It's this very iconic, almost pyramidal peaks just jutting up out of the sea.
Oh, it's fabulous.
Amazing.
I've painted there as well.
Oh, it's unbelievable. So if for people that haven't seen that landscape, it's so worth seeing. Just once in your life, it'll really change you. But I'll take a request like that. I want Milford Sound. I'm like, cool. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come up with 3 design options for, maybe some heavy weather, maybe low light angle, maybe, first thing in the morning, still calm morning or something like that. But I'll come up with 3 designs, 3 options. And then I'll kind of gauge after I submit these designs to them. I'll gauge where thare at. I might even show them some plein air studies like that one that you just put on the screen. I might show them a plein air study and say, hey, what are you feeling here? So this is the way I'd approach Milford Sound. Generally, when I present 3 options, an A, B, and a C, what they'll do is they'll gravitate towards one, maybe not so much the others, or they'll do something that's a combination. But the point is that gives them some sort of indication about where this painting is going to go. It gives them a modicum of control in the process, so they feel like they're involved. I'm not just taking over here. And it also allows me to explore the idea. And any one of these options that they choose, it has to be something that I'd paint anyway. So I actually take an enormous amount of time designing compositions going, if they choose C and C is my least favorite, better get to work on C, because that one right there, that could be the one that they respond to. So I need to make sure each composition is excellent. And then from there, I'll get a decision from them. And then, that's at that point, I probably before I'm engaged in the design work, I'll take a deposit, and then it comes with a guarantee. So basically it's my get out of jail free card and theirs. So I said, if at the end of this process, you don't end up with a painting you absolutely love, I will take that deposit, and that's transferable to another painting. I'll literally start from scratch all over again. So it's not like you have to have that painting. No, that's your painting. You buy it, you bought it, you buy it, go for it. That's yours. I can't do that to my clients. So
I think that's a great practice, and you're still getting a great painting you can sell somebody else too.
Exactly right. If it's typical and in line with your body of work, you've got something that you can put on your website and you can market and you can put out there. So I think, again, I try to go for these whenever I'm doing business with anybody, it has to be win-win. Has to be.
Are you still doing in-person workshops?
Well, I'm about to. In late January, all through February, we're running 2 plein air tours back to back here in the South Island of New Zealand. And this is something that we're starting to do here. We'll probably be doing them year on year here in New Zealand. There's not a lot going on here in New Zealand in terms of plein air. I'd love to see more going on here, but we announced that on our email list months and months ago, and it sold out in less than 24 hours.
Yeah, that's a nice problem to have. I brought groups to New Zealand 2 different times now, and I've got a 3rd one scheduled. So and so we'll get together then. I think the last time I was there, you and I tried to connect, and for whatever reason, you were going through a move or something was happening. We didn't do that.
Well, next time you're down here, we're going to have to go out painting.
We will. So what are you finding are the key principles that your students struggle with the most, and how do you help them overcome those?
Well, I think generally the way I do this, and it's hardly original. I have a methodology that's based on all these things that I've learned, whether I was picking it up from my father, reading about it in books, watching tutorials and videos myself, just learning and absorbing. I've come up with a way that makes sense in my mind to be able to formulate a bit of a methodology and break the process down. I mean, art is a big, vast, complicated thing. So where do we attack this thing? And I find that students tend to struggle in different ways, in unique ways, but there are some similarities that seem to come through. And so I've prioritized these with my methodology, and I say, right, we're just going to focus on the first four things right now. When it comes to painting, we're going to focus on four things. This can apply to drawing as well, but we're going to focus on first every linear aspect of this painting. So what is that? Everything that has to do with line and shape. So everything in the 2D, whether it's line or shape, we're going to focus on that. And so what is that? That's drawing. And so with one thing we're doing with my art school, and I do continually on YouTube, is little drawing demos and drawing tutorials, but also just demonstrating that drawing is fundamental. It's something that we have to have as part of a successful painting practice and hopefully a career. Then the next thing that I focus on is tone. I think that working out the value. So I use tone and value interchangeably, but working out how light or dark something is essential, and creating some sense of interest combined with your line and shape, of creating this alternating pattern of light against dark, dark against light, light against dark, dark against light, but then having a hierarchy of those values. That does so much to creating this sense of depth and realism. And one thing I say in my lessons is tone is king. Tone is absolute king. If you get your tones and your values right and your drawing spot on, you could be slightly off with your color, which is the third thing that we focus on. You could be slightly off there and you get away with it. But if you got great color, then that's when everything, boom, you got those three things. They're just working just in check, and everything's in sync with the next thing. If you could nail those first three, you've just about got it made in the shade. But then I find that last little component, which really separates people that are, beginners and amateurs to intermediate to pro, is how they handle edge, how one thing meets something else. There's a little layer of subtlety there, a bit of nuance there. And, artists like Sargent, like Zorn, like Soroya, in particular, they handled edge amazing. And so I take my students through that hierarchy, and we drill lessons in those sorts of areas. And I find that tends to pick up most of the weak points, or most of the struggle or pain points that people are experiencing. But it really does vary. But I continue to come back to the drawing aspect, because it doesn't matter where you're at in your art journey. I can't think of anybody that wouldn't benefit by drawing more. I think it's really important to just draw, work from observation. Hey, if you don't have anything to observe, yeah, okay, you can work from pictures. I work from photographs all the time, but have a way of making it your own. There's a way to do that, but just draw. Don't stop drawing. I think that's pretty important.
Absolutely. That's critical. So what are, once you get somebody to a point of fairly competent technically, dealing with tone, value, color, drawing, linear, etc., what are the things then that you find make the difference between good and great? You said edges is one of those things. Are there other things, for instance, how do you deal with greens, or how do you deal with making skies feel more realistic? Are there some things like that kind of push people up to a higher level? And what would you say?
Kind of, yeah. Of course, there's little tricks and combinations that you can include. It's like, hey, look, let me give you a 3-step combo for your sky so it doesn't look flat and boring. If we introduce a little bit of earth tone to the bottom line along the horizon, we can make a nice neutral gray, which will blend up into that blue. And now suddenly you got something that looks realistic, smoky, hazy, and pushed far back like Arthur Streeton did. Yeah, you can have a little trick or two like that. But I think the main thing that really makes the difference, going from that transition between good to great, is time. Time is really the thing that we've got to be prepared for, because art's a long journey and it takes hours. It's taken me 20 years. I probably should have put in that image file I sent to you some of the paintings that I was doing when I first started. And so I've been putting in day after day, hour after hour, brush stroke after brush stroke, putting in my brush miles, right? And that's when you start to kind of pick up your own way of doing something. So tricks are great. Tricks are cool. I teach all the tricks. I give all my secrets. But what I do also tell my students is like, hey, just a heads up here, you're going to find your own way. Everybody wants to know as well, like, how do I find my style? How do I find my artistic style?
Yeah, we hear that a lot.
I'm like, you don't find your style. Like to try and find your style, I think is a mistake. Don't try and find your style. Don't even think about style. Think about first, what lights you up? What are you authentically inspired to paint? Then think about how, what it's going to take. What's that time commitment, that investment, that what are you going to pour into this project? And so I think that's the important part. Get completely lost in process of bringing this vision to life. And then out of that, wherever you're showing up authentically, your style has the opportunity to come out of that. But it's always secondary. It's never something that I think we should put at the fore. Because then you end up just going, well, I like Sargent's style. Well, Sargent, I don't think was thinking about style. Sargent was just being Sargent, but it's like, I like his style, like the way he flicks his brush. So I'm going to go and try and paint like Sargent. It's like, I think it's a mistake. Be you. Just do whatever. It's like, I love the way the light is striking this apple. I love this so much. This is okay. We'll try and replicate that faithfully with paint. And you'll come out of that process. What's in you will come out of that process. I went off on a massive tangent there, Eric, and I forgot the original question. I'm sorry, bro.
I don't remember it either.
I didn't even answer your question. I just started talking about something else. I'll do that to you.
Hey, guys, I want to tell you one more thing, just interrupting this broadcast for a second, just a couple of things. I talked to you earlier about Watercolor Live. We do different online events, and our next one after Watercolor Live is going to be in March. It's called Acrylic Live for people who want to learn to paint acrylic from the top acrylic painters. By the way, we've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people already sign up for this. It's just a phenomenon. And a lot of people want to learn acrylic. A lot of people want to get better at acrylic. A lot of us are moving to acrylic for plein air painting when we're going overseas, because we don't want to have to deal with solvents and that kind of a thing. A lot of people are also getting away from solvent-free, doing solvent-free painting, and that's one way to do it. So check it out. It's called Acrylic Live. Just go to acryliclive.com. And one more reminder, and that is the Plein Air Convention is coming up in Lake Tahoe. It's going to be a phenomenon. Be sure to check it out before you go. It's called Plein Air Convention, pleinairconvention.com. So have you given some thought? You're a young guy. Have you given some thought to where this all goes? Do you have an ultimate goal, something that you really hope to accomplish that you've never really set out to do yet?
Sure, of course. But at the also, I have to give it to God each and every day, knowing that I already feel like I'm here on borrowed time, if that makes sense. No day is given. And that it's a blessing that I could just wake up today and here I am, and I could stand on my own 2 feet, and I've got a brush in my hand and away we go. What a blessing this is. It's amazing. Absolutely. So spending as much time in that position of being totally grateful for this opportunity to show up, do what I love and serve. I absolutely love that. So nothing's given. So, but yes, there are some things that I feel like if I were somehow to get struck by lightning this afternoon and I go to meet my maker, that maybe I left a couple of things on the table. So there's a few things that are in me that I'm so inspired by the greats. You know, I'm inspired by Bierstadt. I'm inspired by painters like Monstead and Edward Theodore Compton. There's just a little bit more that I want to say, and a little bit more of this country that I live in now. Because I'm here in New Zealand. I have a wife and a son. You know, I married a beautiful Kiwi girl many years ago that I met in Perth. And so I want to explore more of this country, and also yeah, yes, one of my biggest projects that I'm working on. I cringe when I say projects, but I've got a son to raise now. He's now 3, and you know, I don't want to be one of those weird overbearing parents who forces their kid into some kind of direction or area that they don't want to go in. He can do whatever he wants to do. He can paint whatever traditional realist oil painting subjects he wants to paint. That's as much freedom.
But he has to paint.
He must paint. No.
Well, interestingly, I have triplets.
Oh wow!
And
Wow.
being a dad is the number one job, of course.
Yeah,
And I've never tried to force any of this on them, but there are things that are fun for them that they'll never forget. So, for instance, I lived in San Francisco, and I took my kids out to a little museum in Moraga, California on a Saturday. And I gave them all a sketchbook, and they all had their color code, right? One of the kids was green, one was pink, one was blue. And so I got them sketchbooks in those colors. And I said, while I'm in the museum, small museum, so I could keep an eye on them, I said, I want you to pick out a painting in here and sit down and draw it. And, you know, then they were pretty young. They were maybe 4 or 5 or 6. And they kind of whined about that for a minute. And then I'm wandering around looking at paintings, and then I'm checking in with them. And when it was time to go, they're like, Dad, we don't want to go. And I said, why? And they said, well, every time we look at this more, we see more and more things in the painting. And so they wanted to sketch them into their paintings. Those things, my kids today are not obsessed with art like I am. I don't try to push it on them, but they have it in them because of little moments like that, that they will eventually come back to it. It's like anything else. You expose them to a lot of things, and something is going to appeal to them at some point. And 2 of my 3 paint, and but they're not obsessed with it, but they still paint. And they would have never had that had they not been, hanging around with me in the studio. So just that time, and look at Jeremy. You talked about Jeremy Lipking, and Jeremy used to hang out in his dad's studio when he was little, and got instruction. And Alexei Steele, the same thing. His dad was a great Russian master, and so that stuff rubs off. And now Alexei just has got his twins painting plein air with him. So
Awesome.
These things do continue.
Oh yeah, I'm excited to take my boy up into the mountains and paint plein air with him.
Yeah,
that's going to be a lot of fun. He's a little bit young and a little bit rambunctious at this age. I would shudder at some of the mischief that he would get up to, in a place like in the mountains. So I'm like, I'm just gonna wait maybe about another year before I start taking him on hikes with him.
Well, he's about that age. Soon you'll be able to take him camping and things like that.
Absolutely.
Well, are there some things that you'd like to touch on that we've not touched on yet?
Well, I think, everybody wants to know as well, like, how do you go pro? Or how do I make this work as a business? Because I find that a lot of people are fascinated with that. And I don't know, maybe we could riff on that a little bit.
Let's do it.
Because it's something that I get questions on all the time. And, a lot of people also wondering, is it too late? Everybody's already on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, or social media. Is it too late for me to share my art? I'm like, no, jump in. The more the merrier. I'm not. I mean, is there competition? Well, maybe, but I haven't really found that. I haven't found that competition's a thing. I think the more of us out there doing this, um, the better. I like what you said before about, that if you have something, it's your responsibility to share it. There's a lot of great artists working today that aren't online sharing their process, and I think it'd be wonderful to have that. I think it would add so much. And one effect that I think it's having is look, maybe the people listening to this will disagree, but I think some of the best painting that's ever been done is being produced today.
I think so too.
I think that it's also a result of how much painting is out there, because I think one experience leverages the other. We can all look over each other's shoulders at, notice how I'm adding myself to that mix up. I'm so not in that group. But anyway, we're looking over each other's shoulders and going, hey, what'd you do there? What'd you figure out there? What's that color combination there? And it's like, we're leveraging those experiences. And I think it continues to drive this forward, and we accelerate the development of this as a visual art. And, I think, there's so much talk out there also, particularly in contemporary spheres, about how art is, painting's dead. Well, not for me, it's not. There's a thriving world out there of people that appreciate traditional realism, representational work, huge market for it. And I think it's part of that, an essential component of that is how much people are sharing online. And we get to follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and the YouTubes and all that good stuff.
It's only dead because somebody in a high position says it's dead, and it's not dead. I mean, I think, you're a heavy influencer. There are a lot of artists who are great influencers, and they're touching the lives of literally millions of people. On my art school live daily, 12 noon on YouTube, I've had 16 million views. You probably get that on a regular basis, that kind of viewership with your YouTube account and with your other stuff. You have a chance to touch a lot of people, and this is a world where everything's different. It used to be there were people who would control the outcome of things. It's similar to the media dialogue that's been going on today in America. The idea is that everybody has an equal chance. Anybody who has an iPhone can become an Instagram superstar if they're smart about it and they follow some protocols and learn how to do it. The people have an opportunity to speak up and say what to do. I mean, I couldn't do bookkeeping. Thankfully, somebody can.
Yeah, exactly. Goodness. Yeah. Yeah, that's really that's really important. I love that. A day without pain is like a day without oxygen. You're not going to go very far without that, are you? Yeah, I love that. Yeah, no, Eric, I would actually really I would love to ask you more about the marketing side, and I'm intrigued by this online marketing event. When is that happening, and how can I sign up?
I'm not going to reveal anything about it yet, and I
Okay.
apologize for that. But
Okay.
I announced it to the audience on Realism Live, and here's what happened.
Mhm.
We have a cocktail party paint along at the end of our virtual events each night, and
Mhm.
so we just talk about anything and everything. And you've got all these people on. Not everybody attends it, and a lot of people started asking marketing questions, and then somebody chimed in and said, well, why don't you do an event on marketing? And I said, well, I don't really want to do that. And they said, why? And I said, well, when I teach marketing at the Plein Air Convention, and I used to do 3 mornings, just about an hour and a half each morning. And it would take me about 3 or 4 days to prepare for each hour. And I said, to do a full day marketing event, we're talking about 30 days of preparation or more. And so I said, I'm not real eager to do it. I like to do things off the top of my head. I do an art marketing podcast. I do art marketing at the end of this podcast. I do on my YouTube show, I do a Monday thing on marketing. But I told these people it would be exclusive to them, unless they, unless they said that, they'd be willing to open it up. So I'm testing that. And if it decides I'm going to do it, I'll let you know. But it's, we announced something, we sold several hundred seats for that. So whether or not I'm going to open it up to the general public is yet to be determined. So hang in there. I'm sorry, I didn't want to, I wasn't actually setting you up so that you would give me a chance to promote it.
No,
I should be ready for that.
Because so I'm a learner. I continually learn, and my thing is, everybody is my superior in some way. Everybody. And so I want to, whenever I'm talking to somebody, I also look at it as an opportunity, maybe selfishly, but it is an opportunity that I can learn something here from, and I can certainly learn a lot from you. But I'm always listening to audiobooks when I'm painting, when I'm working here in the studio, just ways that I could better myself as an artist or however. And it's and as somebody that's running a business and a team now, I have a responsibility to keep this thing going, because I got people that are relying on this for their livelihood and income. So I've got a reason to continue to be, innovating and doing things that work, and working on my systems, working on keeping everything going, right? So
and you have to take that very seriously.
Yep.
Absolutely, when you start realizing that families don't eat if you screw up, and I've been in business for a long, long time, and I've screwed up, and I've had to fire people because I screwed up, and it's a really bad day for me, but it's a really bad month or year for them. And so making sure the families on your team are your number one priority behind your own family, and
Absolutely.
they're pretty much equal. So we'll talk about that sometime. I'll tell you what, we'll do something at another time where we can answer some of those questions.
Excellent. Well, happy to dive back into the art if you want to ask me some more questions, or
Well, I think
I can take this anywhere.
I think we've done well, and I think what we'll do is we'll save that for a part B in the future, because I think we have a lot in common, and I think you've done some amazing things, and we'll have you back on the Plein Air Podcast, and who knows, maybe we'll do some things together.
That'd be wonderful. I really look forward to it. And again, thank you so much for this opportunity, and wonderful to now have met you, even if it's online. But I'm looking forward to the day we can paint alongside one another.
Oh, that won't be long, I guarantee it.
Awesome.
See you. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. You're a generous guy. We really loved hearing your story. I'm looking forward to doing some more. Maybe we'll do a part 2 in the future. And I'm going to be doing Andrew's podcast coming up soon, so we'll watch for that. He'll be interviewing me. He'll be much tougher on me than I was on him. That's for sure. Okay. Don't forget about Andrew's YouTube channel, which is at Andrew Tischler, and visit his website, which is tisch.academy. Thanks again to Andrew. Now let's go to the Marketing Minute.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
Send your questions to me at Eric at Plein Air Magazine or Eric at artmarketing.com, wherever you want to send them. And if you want to come on live when we're recording this, you can do that too. Here's a question from Bobby Teat Donahue. And the question is, how much value do you place on having a website to share your artwork? Is it a necessity? I am considering a website, but having a hard time justifying the cost in my head. Well, I think there's a couple of things here. First off, I have a whole lot of feelings about websites. I think things are changing. I think websites are still very important, but I do think there's going to be a new breed of ways that artists are going to be found on the web. And I'm excited about that, but I can't talk much about what's going to be happening yet. But I think there's going to be some changes. But the bottom line is, if you have a website, it doesn't do you any good unless you have a strategy. an art marketing strategy to get people to visit your website. Because it's like, I remember in the old days, they had a thing, it was a phone book. And, in Los Angeles, was 5 feet thick, 5 inches thick. And, it's like saying to somebody, hey, I'm in the phone book. Well, nobody's going to you've got to have somebody who's going to specifically seek you out. But if you're just hoping that somebody will randomly find you in the phone book, well, they might randomly find you in the yellow pages of the phone book. Remember those? But the idea is you want to drive people to your website. And so you have to be committed to marketing. You cannot expect the website to just deliver traffic. A lot of that has to do with what's called SEO strategy. And SEO is basically search engine optimization. So you want to be able to show up in Google search or in Bing or whoever you're using, DuckDuckGo. And so you've got to be putting things out there so that people can find you. Part of that means you've got to do fresh content on your website pretty much all the time, because if it's not been updated, they'll never push it to you. They're looking for updates every week. And so I go to artists, sometimes we're considering an artist for something we're going to do, a project we're going to do. I'll go to their website and, you'll find that old 1995 style website, or maybe 2000 style website says enter here. And you'll go in and everything has not been updated for 5 years. If you're going to have a website, update it. Otherwise, you're wasting your time and your money. So you've got to treat it like it's a precious commodity, and you have to update it. You have to market it. You have to promote it. Unless you're selling artwork and you think a website is going to sell artwork for you, I think it's pretty unlikely. Now, there are some people who specialize in websites for artists, or there's lots of other options out there. This stuff has become a commodity these days. It's a good idea to preserve what's called your URL, www.ericrhoads.com, that kind of a thing. And you should have one if you're a professional, or you need to have something that's going to supplement that. Now, one of the things that supplements it is having your name in Instagram and Facebook. That really is important. And it might be important, depending on the demographic you're going after, to be on other sites like X or Threads or Snapchat or other things. But you want to be able to be found, right? So the goal here is, these days, instead of, if I'm searching an artist, I usually go on Instagram. I don't go on the web. Once in a while, I'll go on the web. But Instagram is where people are posting their pictures, and it's a good place to get a feel for that. So I think, Bobby, it's up to you, but there's a lot more to it. By the way, the idea of I'm having trouble justifying the cost in my head, the cost is going to be 10, 20, 30, 40 bucks a month. If you're not willing to spend that money to sell paintings, to get customers, you're never going to get customers. You have to be willing to spend money. The person who spends the most money, gets the most customers, ends up selling more than anybody else. It's like entering art competitions. You got to spend money to enter them. But when you win, even if you win in a single category like nocturne painting for the month of January or something, then you have something to talk about. It's something to help promote you. It gets other people to see your name. And Camille Preswatic said that she enters the Plein Air Salon, for instance, every time. She entered it every month for 13 years before she finally won the main prize. But she won other prizes. She won some cash, but she had all this stuff to talk about. She said it was really important to her. So you got to be willing to invest money if your goal is to sell. If it's an ego play and you just want something to show to your friends, just use Instagram. Show your friends on Instagram. Question number 2 is from Crystal H in Tennessee. Okay. So can I address some email list do's and don'ts? Well, yeah, I can. I do a lot of email, as you probably know. Email list do's and don'ts are different than email do's and don'ts. First off, do not send an email to a mass group of people unless they have done what's called opting in. If they have not opted in, that means they subscribed to something where you had a chance to give them a chance to subscribe, then it's technically illegal. Now, you can send anybody an email one-on-one, one at a time, but if you're doing a mass email list, then you have to have opt-ins. And sometimes people forget they opt-ins. And the second thing is you have to have a way they can easily opt out. They can get off your list immediately. That's really critical. You do not want to get investigated by the authorities, right, on something like that. And in terms of other things with your email list, you have to check deliverability. If an email is not being delivered, let's say that you send an email to me and I change my email address and I no longer have that old email address. If it shows up as undelivered, it actually hurts you. And so when you go to send it, first off, a lot of the email providers will not send it if you have a history of a bunch of stuff going out that's bad. They want you to have what's called a clean list. They want to have people that are opening emails. And so if people are not opening your emails, then it becomes less deliverable. Then Google isn't going to deliver it, or whomever, or the suppliers aren't going to deliver it. So there's a lot of stuff with that. So you got to keep your list fresh and up to date. Now, related to sending emails, in terms of do's and don'ts, make sure you're sending something that's of value that people want. Make sure that you've established trust. They know who you are and they know why you send them things. Make sure that they always have a chance to opt out. The key to email marketing is a strong subject line. That little tiny subject line, those 3, 4, 5, 6 words. If I pick up my phone and I look at the subject line on my phone, it's only showing about 4 words and then it cuts it off. If it's on my browser, it shows more words. Most people check their email on their phones, about 80%. So you need a subject line that's about 4 words long that is going to grab people's attention. You could be giving away $1 million inside your website. Nobody would ever visit it because they wouldn't know. So your subject line gets people to open it. Now, the next thing that's the most important thing, there's a lot of statistics on this. The first most important thing is the subject line. Do you know what the second most important thing is? The photograph. The photograph. Now, the third most important thing, and equally important if you don't have a photograph, is your headline. You want to have a strong, easy to read, bold, stand out headline that's going to really get a lot of attention and make you want to read further. So there's a technique that was come up. The guy that came up with it was a guy named Gary Bencivenga. He was one of the great copywriters of all time. I don't know if he's alive anymore, but he's not. I don't think he's writing anymore, but he's written a couple of great books that you can find. And he talks about the slide. What you want to do is pretend you're at a child's playground and you've got to get people to climb to the top of the slide. And when they get to the top, they slide all the way down to the point where they're ready to purchase your product, right? So the slide is a strong subject line. That's one rung in the ladder. A strong headline. That's another rung in the ladder. The next is a strong photo. The next is a strong first paragraph. And then a strong second paragraph. One thing relates to the hierarchy. So once you get a strong first paragraph and a strong second paragraph, typically all of a sudden they get to the top of the slide and they read through. Not everybody reads everything. People will skim. That's why it's important to have some things bolded or some headlines or some sub headlines. And then, you bring them down. And then the next most important thing is a call to action. If you're trying to sell something, right? Or you're trying to get them to come to an event, that might be different. But, it might be make your reservation now. That's a call to action. Or click the buy button. That's a call to action. So there's a lot of different things you can do in that regard, but you want to have that there. And of course, if you're selling something, the other thing that's really